Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kappa Pi Artist Spotlight, where we celebrate creativity, passion, and the incredible talent within our artistic community. I'm Stephanie, and today in this episode, we're talking with Nicholas Kalemba. You may have had him as your painting or drawing professor. He's an amazing artist and is sharing his work with us. We'll dive into the stories behind his pieces and what drives his creative journey. So sit back, get inspired, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to see more artist features right here on the Kappa Pi channel. Let's get into it.
Hi, Stephanie. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Opening questions. What inspired you to become an artist?
So, I think a lot of practicing artists and educators who are artists probably have a similar answer to me for that one. I've been drawing and painting my entire life, as soon as I could hold a pencil or a paintbrush, I've been drawing. So it's one of those things where I don't think I ever made a conscious decision to become an artist. It's one of those things that, I've tried. I've had so many different jobs in every field imaginable. But I always came back to the arts, and this is kind of where I ended up.
Okay. What challenges have you faced in your artistic career and how did you overcome them?
Um, Probably another one that a lot of professional artists might answer similarly. I think it's finding number one, your kind of voice as an artist. The work that you make, whether it's paintings that are figurative or digital illustrations or animation or sculpture or whatever it might be. So I think that was one kind of difficult thing for me to kind of find my voice in my own work. But I think from like a real world perspective, it's how do you make money at this? How do you make money at being an artist? And I think there's this whole myth of like the starving artist thing. I think there's a little bit of truth to that. But that's usually people who just don't seek out enough opportunities or keep their door open for enough things. So for me, I've always been, open to different things, open to different media, open to different pursuits in as long as they're kind of within the arts. And it's kind of led me to sort of being a jack of all trades, which I think most artists nowadays kind of are in some ways, just to be able to, get paid for what it is that you love to do, right?
Thank you.
Yeah,
And let's get into your work.
great.
What materials and techniques did you use for this piece?
So this particular one that you're seeing on the screen is from this kind of sideline series of work that I've been pursuing for a couple years now. And materials wise, it's gouache paint, which is similar to watercolor paint, but a little bit more opaque, a little bit covers things a little bit better on an actual sheet or torn out page from in this case, Dr. Seuss children's book. This particular one is from, I think, like the 70s, if I remember correctly. So it's essentially paint on found materials. And like I said, this particular like series, they're all gouache on different sort of found materials.
Was there a particular visual reference or influence?
Um, so when we kind of look at some of my, the larger sort of my main body of work, which are all paintings on panel or canvas or something similar, these are kind of like a little, um, maybe like a precursor to those sometimes, or like one little snippet of the larger, more complex paintings. So for these particular ones, I have sort of a visual library, like a physical library of old books, old magazines, printed material, and things that I often use in my larger paintings. But for the gouache on paper series, I'm kind of taking those physical printed materials and then some of my more digital materials, my digital library of imagery, and I'm kind of just interested in like clashing two of them together in a little bit more simplistic way. So these don't really begin, with any sort of like vision where I'm like, okay, I want a pink inflatable flamingo on a page with this text or that. I'm kind of like I take one and then I like go through my library and just see what happens kind of visually and metaphorically when I kind of like force the two of them together. So they're quicker in that way. They're a little bit simpler than the complex paintings, and they satisfy me, I think, in a different way than these longer paintings, which take months and many, many hours to make. All of these gouache paintings that you'll see on the printed pages of found material, those are like 1 day paintings. Hope that answered your question somewhat.
Why did you choose this composition or layout?
Yeah. So, kind of, riffing off or continuing what I was saying about the gouache paintings, they're almost like one-liner jokes. They're kind of cheap in a way, or a little bit more easily digestible than some of the large paintings that I make, which are, visually very layered and metaphorically very layered as well too. These are kind of like one to one, a little bit easily more readable. But at the end of the day, meaning and metaphor and concept aside, what's the one thing that any piece of visual media has to do? It's to grab your attention. It's to be visually compelling in some way, right? So this particular one started in that way. It started as just, I have this pretty complex black and white image with like this beautiful, in my opinion, this like beautiful yellowing of the paper and these old masking tape and scotch tape that's like yellowed over, 60 years probably. Um, so I was kind of looking through my visual library, and the swords, the knives kind of like piercing the paper, um, you know, metaphor starts to come into play, right? Sometimes people will kind of like throw around cliches when they look at paintings, like stabbed in the back, little phrases like that are usually how people will try and kind of like make sense of something that isn't immediately like, boom, this means that. So I just started kind of like making for myself this connection between like backstabbing, and then these two couples. And if you really start to like read the actual text from this ad, it's about like I believe this is from the 1950s, if I remember correctly. It's about like this supplement for men to like beef them up. You know what I mean? And the title of the piece is Too Skinny, right? So this guy was, too skinny before this miracle vitamin, this miracle drug that they were, selling to him. So I don't ever like to outright pin down my own artwork with like a one sentence explanation or anything like that. If I could do that, I wouldn't need to make the painting. I wouldn't need to make the art. It's visual communication at the end of the day, not literary, in my opinion.
Great. Can you tell me about this piece? What's the story behind it?
Yeah. Um, so like I said, a lot of these gouache paintings on paper, this in this case a book cover. Um, I mean, most of my work is pretty darkly humorous or like self-deprecating in some way. And I've played with this motif of like the mushroom cloud, like the nuclear bomb, in a lot of my paintings. It's just a motif that's come up over and over again. And this one did start a little bit a little bit on the front end of the process where I had this one particular book cover. And immediately, for one reason or another, for better or for worse, my mind immediately went to mushroom cloud, right? And I think the you know the we've all been there in this position where you're being put on the spot for something, and just like the rage inside of you boils up. And I think this one being kind of like a visual manifestation of that, was just something that was darkly hilarious to me. So that's kind of how this one ended up.
How do you know when a piece is done?
That's a fantastic question. Um, I think the painting will tell you when it's done. And, I think I've said this to you, Stephanie, in our drawing class, but I say it to my painting students and my drawing students all the time, where, you know, you'll put up a piece of work that you've spent hours, 20 hours on, right? You put it up on the wall, you take a step away from it, you get some time away, maybe a day, and you come back to it. And in your in your gut, you're like, despite all the hours that I've invested in this piece, it's just not done. It's not rendered correctly, or the light quality isn't there, or my, initial, the initial kind of like spontaneity that started the piece is gone, right? So for me, the painting will tell you, or the drawing will tell you when it's done. That being said, I think that comes with experience. It's generally so much easier for me and my colleagues, as people who've been making art for a very long time, to look at something pretty quickly, and pretty quickly tell you, whether it's done or not, or even if you've overworked it. So that, comes from, a lifetime of making stuff and looking at stuff that other people have made, right?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are there visual sources or inspiration that helped shape the look of this work?
Yeah. So I kind of mentioned my sort of visual library, or the multiple visual libraries that I have. One of them being, this collection of physical media that I have, whether it's like printed materials or film or music. But also I have sort of this digital library that, I'm photographing things. I'm pretty often, when I travel or when I'm just outside of my house or my studio, I'm photographing things a lot. And, sometimes it's something as simple as like this particular flower, or something as simple as this particular marble bust, that there's multiple versions of it, but this one was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York. Or something as simple as this rusted staircase, right, that I came across here in Central Florida. But then kind of on top of that, there's sort of this library that I think every visual artist creates. And it's sort of like this mental library, this library that consists of, art history, pop culture, other artists. The list goes on and on, right? News media, right? Cartoons for me. And this particular one came um, from probably one of my favorite paintings of art history, a John Singer Sargent painting called Carnation, Lily, Lily, Rose. And there's some sort of like color palette similarities that were going on between this painting and that painting. But that's where it started. I was like, what would it look like if I kind of made my version of that painting in some way? And it, devolved and changed and adapted as the painting went on. And this is kind of where I ended up with it, right? But in some ways, it started from that, like, that one particular thing, that one sort of thing that was kind of like itching at me, or like gnawing at me, that got me started in this painting. And I never like to, know where I'm going to end up with a painting, like how boring is that to just sort of like execute, a printer could do a, million times better job than I could with a, an image like this. So leaving some of those things kind of like open to spontaneity, I think is vital, is really vital for any visual artist.
Can you talk about your color choices? Why these tones?
Yeah. So for the majority of my sort of formal training, I guess, as a colorist, as someone who uses and understands kind of the psychology of color, I was really, really concerned and interested in sort of like the subtleties of realism, I guess you could call it, tertiary colors, neutral colors, and how uh, to kind of like punctuate them with more vibrant color, right? And as time has gone on, I've I find myself kind of like just wanting to have more fun and be a little bit more difficult with color palettes. So you'll see this in a lot of the work where, there's like overwhelming use of color in sort of like specific areas. I hear this thing all the time from students and other artists where they're like, I love color. I'm just in love with color. And then it'll be just like they'll show me a painting that's like vomit of rainbow on the canvas, right? But I think if you truly love color, you use it strategically. You use it for emphasis, or you use it to balance things when it comes to, warm and cool, or like neutral and saturated and things like that. So, in most of my work, I for some reason or another love this like unnatural pink. A few years ago, Pantone um, dubbed it millennial pink. May have something to do, probably with me being a millennial myself. But this particular pink I use um, sort of metaphorically and visually a lot. Um, and I know I told you and have told others, I don't usually like to kind of like give away all of my secrets. But most of the time when I use that millennial pink, we'll call it, it's for me kind of like on a personal level, it's a signifier of something or someone who is gone, or like dead, past, the idea is dead or something like that. Um, yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah,
Can you walk me through your process from concept to completion?
yeah, absolutely. Um, for this particular one, because I think with every painting that I make, um, it's weird every time I start a new painting or pick up a paintbrush, I feel like I've forgotten everything that I've ever known about painting, and I usually start terrified and not having any idea what I'm doing, and then I'll pick it up, you know what I mean, and things will come together, and I'm like, what was I thinking? I knew what I was doing all along. But this particular one started from a very simple idea. I wanted to make a painting of millennial pink Michelangelo's Pietà. Right, that was it. Didn't have any idea what any other of the other elements would be, or if this would even work out, or be interesting, or compelling, or well painted at all. So it started with that, and I started to kind of question like why would I have that desire, that notion? And for me, it kind of led me down this path of like mastery in art, and like saying something new with such an old media, such an antiquated medium as painting is, physical painting, right? So it got me kind of questioning whether there is anything new to be said, right? And then that's what the painting became. That's what the painting is about. It's about this idea of the question, like I said, of whether or not there's anything new to be said in painting, and kind of looking through history all the way to, for me, kind of like the genesis of, one of the first masterpieces that has stood the test of time, Michelangelo's Pietà. It's kind of like the high watermark for many people, artists and art consumers alike. So as that kind of idea started to evolve in the painting, I started, looking at things outside of art, of visual media, where people have asked the same question. So a couple, little references just to talk about. Um, there's um, kind of an argument in a Smiths song from the 80s about this whole idea of being able to say something new or novel in poetry. And the person's kind of like using the poets Keats and Wilde as, to prove their point that, well, one person says, no, there's nothing new to be said. And one person says, yes, there is something new to be said. And then starts to recite a poem. But in reciting the poem, they kind of unwittingly plagiarize someone else, right? So they kind of disproved themselves in the process. And then I guess, for example, the this head at the top, this sort of mummified head, is the man's name is John Torrington. He's from the Franklin expedition, where they were essentially, this is during the age of sail. They were trying to find the Northwest Passage, trying to strike new ground, trying to do something new, something novel, right? And in the process, obviously, they did find it, but they all died. And years later, we found some of their mummified bodies in the permafrost in the Arctic. So, you know, it's again kind of like this darkly humorous sort of like questioning and take on, possibly what happens when you try to strike new ground. I guess I'll leave it at that.
Wow. Do you start with a concept, a feeling, a visual, or something else?
It goes back and forth for me. Um, as kind of similar to the last painting where I thought I need to make a painting of a pink Pietà, right? This particular one was the same thing, in that, I'm, as I said before, I'm a collector of a lot of things, like visual media. Film is one of them, right? I'm just like a cinephile, they call it. I'm obsessed with film and the history of film. So I love The Wizard of Oz, right? And this particular one, I couldn't tell you how it came to be. Um, but I had this idea where I was, for some reason or another, I thought, need to make a painting of Dorothy's ruby slippers with Narcan nasal spray, right? I no idea how that happened. But in the same way that I'm kind of like photographing things and writing things down and screenshotting things in my daily life, whenever something like visually will just kind of like boom, like pop up, I'll just write it down. I have like a little text file on my phone that I type them in usually if I don't have a pen and paper. And going back into it, I went back into it the other day, just kind of like going through these sort of like fleeting ideas. This particular one was literally ruby slippers with Narcan animated into a spin. So I'm not sure what kind of like psychotic break or something I had when that happened. But that's how this one started. And it's simpler, you know what I mean? It's a much simpler painting, I think, visually, than the last painting is. But it just made sense to me. It was one of those things where like, yeah, I just had to do it. I had to get it out of my system. And I remember painting this one in a matter of, I think, 2 weeks, when we were all sent home from UCF during the the last hurricane last fall. So it was a quick one for me.
What tools, media, and techniques came together in this work?
The paintings on canvas or panel, the large scale paintings like this one, are all oil paint on oil ground, oil gesso. So I have a very smooth surface. I work really hard to get my surfaces where I want them. So very, very smooth. But then on top of that, this was kind of the start of a new sort of series, a new body of work for me, where after the painting was completed, I went and photographed each, little 24 sections of the little red and white object on there. And then using Premiere Pro. I kind of, had to teach myself Premiere Pro in a short amount of time. Compiled those into 24 frame animation that repeats. And then again, kind of had to learn this myself, teach this myself, pipe that into essentially an Arduino that gets sent to these CRT televisions that you see on the bottom on the right image over here. So, in a way, this was kind of a foray into mixed media for me. But at the end of the day, I'm a hardcore painter. My love is just smearing mud around on a piece of wood or a piece of canvas like this. But like I said, this has kind of been a new direction for me. I have a couple new paintings that are kind of being compiled into animations that all started with this one. So I'm excited about it.
Do you prefer your symbolism to be explained or left open to interpretation?
So it's a fine line between like not giving away too much and not giving away enough. So if I lean in one direction, it's into the cryptic side, into the how I need to spend time with this work of art and dissect it and, try and understand it. And maybe I never do understand it. But I'm okay with that when I consume art, when I look at other people's art. And I just hope that other people can be too. Um, Taking something huge, this amazing idea that you can't really even like put into words accurately and try and put it into the words. It just takes something really big and minimizes it into something small. So that being said, I hope that no one who looks at my paintings just says, it's just a random assortment of crap. He just threw a bunch of stuff together and, here's where he ended up. Because it's absolutely not that. I spend huge, huge amounts of time just thinking about the work and what do symbols mean? How do we use symbols? What happens when these symbols get forced together or juxtaposed together? Um, so yeah, I hope that makes sense, and I hope people find sort of like the love of mystery and like the search for meaning that I've always had for art. My favorite paintings growing up were the ones, and my favorite films and my favorite music are the things that, I look at or listen to or watch where I'm like, I don't quite understand what's going on, right? Because then it sticks with me and I think about it, I take it home with me. It's not this sort of like, boom, I see it, on to the next one kind of thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. And final questions. What advice will you give to a young artist trying to break it into the art world?
That's a that's a good question. That is a layered question. I'll try to give my best advice briefly. Um, Try a lot of things, number one. Um, Experiment with a lot of different things and hopefully a technique or a media or a subject matter will click with you, right? And then follow that. You know what I mean? Like hunt that down, find that passion, and when you do find it, just like grab it by the scruff and hold on to it. Um, because I think so many people just expect like inspiration to just like happen, and and they don't find it, you know what I mean? Because they're not experimenting, they're not just like trying different things. So that would be number one. Number two, it's kind of related to that one. Just make, just make stuff. Just make. You'll hear me say this. You'll hear so many of my colleagues and artists say this. Making is thinking. When your hands are moving, it quiets your mind to a certain degree, and kind of like lets the important thoughts come to the surface and like float to the surface. But you gotta just be throwing out that fishing line for ideas, materials, processes, whatever it might be. And because if you're not, you might catch one little fish, you know what I mean, every few months or something. But if you're just constantly like throwing out that fishing line, you're gonna have a lot of bad ideas. You're gonna have a lot of mediocre ideas, but you're definitely inevitably gonna find some wonderful ideas. So that's some of the advice I think on the conceptual or the more fine art side of things. But on the applied side of things, um, always, this comes from my experience. I would not say no to any opportunity when you're starting out as an artist. Um, I have been fortunate enough to find a great love for teaching that I didn't expect. I went into the arts thinking that I wouldn't have to talk to anyone or interact with anyone, um, and just be in my studio, doing my thing, and never thought that I would teach or want to teach. But when I kind of had the opportunity as a grad student to teach, pretty quickly I learned that I just loved it, just absolutely loved it. And I wouldn't have had that opportunity had I said, no, I'm good. Same with my mural work. I've been fortunate enough for the past almost a decade at this point to build a pretty substantial mural business outside of my studio practice and my teaching. And it literally started with someone saying, hey, Nick, um, love your paintings. They're huge. They're detailed. Would you be interested or open to doing a mural at my restaurant? And I was like, I have no idea how to do a mural. I don't, what materials do I use? How much of it do I buy? Like, do I get up on like a ladder? How do I do this? But I said, yeah, immediately, right? And I figured it out afterwards, and if there's something that anybody going to college is gonna get, it's like problem solving skills and critical thinking skills. Like any school at UCF, engineering, math, medical sciences, art. I think we're all like this under this umbrella of like, let's be critical, let's solve these problems and get it done. You know what I mean? So, yeah, don't say no to anything within reason, obviously, And as time, goes on, the things that you'll say no to will get, you'll say no to more and more as time goes on, just because you don't have, energy or time for it. But yeah, I think those would be my two kind of complementary pieces of advice.
Thank you. We appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you for watching this episode of Copy Pie Artist Spotlight. We hope you enjoyed getting to know Nicholas Kalemba and his creative journey. Want to see more amazing student artists, upcoming events, and behind the scenes content? Scan the QR code on the screen to follow us on our social media platforms. Stay connected, stay inspired, and support the arts. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.